Alrighty, this is should we call it part 1.5 of the project on PC92 repair. We're working on that board over there at present. Jason Field dropped this one off. Another big shout out to him. He was dropping something off to me in the process. So I figured out, by the way, that you don't need to have all the 12 volt lines connected. You only have to have the 15. So I've got my meaty power supply up again. It's running just slightly over 15 because there's a bit of voltage drop through the leads. That's giving me a nice 15 volts here. And we're focused on this area here, which is the reset section. Well, it's actually not, but I'll explain that in a minute. Now, he's done a lot of trace repair there. And if you look at the section, the reset section for Project Coin is comprised of these 4 transistors here. There's one up there, there's capacitor, then there's one here, and one here. It looks very daunting, and it is. To a newcomer it is, but if you have the schematics in the circuit description, then you can figure out what's going on. Now, as you know, there's no drawings available for PC92, but luckily for us, like I said before, Procon Plus and PC92 are not identical, but they're very similar. Most of the core system is identical. There's some part numbering that's different down here, but it's essentially the same. And the reset circuit between Procon Plus and Project Coin PC92 is pretty much identical to what you see here. So we can use the Procon Plus schematics to figure out what the hell's going on here. And we'll do that just now. So bear with me. Right, so here's the schematic for the Project Coin reset circuit. Procon Plus, but PC92 is pretty much the same. You look at that as a beginner and you think, what on earth is going on there? But this isn't a reset circuit at all. It's a reset protection circuit. What it's there to do is to stop the board resetting if the 15 volts or the 5 volts is missing. That's all it is. The only timing component here is this capacitor here. Now, trying to diagnose this just by looking at that would be complex enough. I can kind of work out what's going on. I've got T4 there, which is obviously the main reset. So that's tied there. That's tied to ground. It just has a pull-up resistor so it can only go to 5 volt or ground. You've got a blocking diode here, which means that if this transistor is turned on, power will be dragged away from here and start turning that off. If that transistor is turned off, power will be sent through this network instead and go through here. But then you've got all this mess here, this T2 tied into itself and then this T1 tied into itself. So when you get a situation like that, you need to go to the circuit description. And the great thing is, with this diagram, there is a circuit description. Project Coin, in their manual, they give you a theory of operation, a circuit description. So, it's basically designed that way so you can't rapidly turn it on and off like you could do a pinball machine and trick the reset. So, comprised T1, T2, T3, T4 and associated resistors. T1 acts like a Zener diode. So it's the junction between those 3 resistors there. Cause the 2 outer legs of that transistor to be 2.4 volts. And then T2 and T3 are configured with a unijunction transistor, which is, well, that wasn't available by the 90s when this tech came out. So they had to make one out of discrete parts. So the voltage amount of T2 has to be greater than 0.5 volts than the voltage at the junction of R8 and R7 to turn T3 on. And then T4 is just an inverter of T3. That makes sense. That's why it's got the diode. T4 will always be the opposite of T3. Okay. So now we know that. We've read that. We can go back to our diagram. Oh, here we are. So, they've included the power supply in as well, but I think they're just trying to save paper. Right, so we know that this is now... All that does is it sets the voltage. It drops the voltage by 2.5 volts. Now, that's on the 15 volt rail, but I know from experience that going through that resistor there gives you 8 volts at this leg. and 5.6, 5.7 volts at that line, because you're dropping 2.4 volts across the transistor. That's what this network here does. It's a complex voltage divider, and they've tried to get a very close value resistors by using two precision ones in parallel, and basically tie the transistor back into the base of itself, so that this circuit self-regulates with a feedback loop to provide 2.5 volts across it, giving you 5.5 volts here, and it's got a load resistor on the output. I think that's just to give it something to drive into so it doesn't do weird stuff. But so that 5.5 volts will travel across here, and it'll charge this capacitor up, and that gives you a reset pulse. This diode here, by the way, is to, I believe that it's to stop the capacitor charging just from here. And it's also to provide a method of discharging the capacitor when powered off. Okay, so this charges up here. 5 volts coming, can't charge this capacitor here because this diode blocks it. So the voltage arrives at T2, and then the voltage here has to be half a volt greater than there to send power to here and turn this on, which will then turn this off and send that high. But when you're charging this capacitor up, provided the conditions are met for this and power is passing through here, this will be turned off and that will be turned on, pulling that to low. So that's the best way I can describe it in layman's terms. Basically, you've got two switches. If the 15 volts here, this part doesn't work, you don't get power to the capacitor here. If the 5 volts here, the pulse doesn't get through here, and this doesn't work. So we know the reset is stuck high, it never changes. So we could go about, what we need to do is test here, and what we also need to do is check for a pulse coming into here, but we won't check it at T2, we'll check it at R6, because if we get the pulse through R6, we know that T2 is working. Okay. Righty. Then we've got the meter set up here. One leg into ground. So our first test this is T1. That up there's T2. T3. And then right down here is T4. So just power on. By the way, this is a monster power supply. It can provide 2.5 amps a channel, but if I switch it to parallel mode, I can drive both sides of the power supply through one output and put nearly 4 amps through, something of a wish. So any more shorted capacitors that are about, they don't know what's coming. So power on. And the board's drawn. Oh, the board's drawn a devilish value of power. That's a horrible number to be drawn. Right, so T1. Let's check what the Zener diode transistors has got across it. 5.6. On its, and it's with the BC23, it's a collector base emitter across the flat. So that's correct. We get 5.6 volts coming through there, and 8.8 volts coming through the other side. Now, if we check at T2, we don't even need to check at T2, we can check. That's R6 and that's R7 and 8. There's one side. R5, R6, R7, R8. suspect that's a little bit wrong. Hold on. It's a little bit tricky to get to T2. Right. So that's going to be the emitter. We get 5 volts coming through there. So the base has to be 0.5 volt lower than that. There's our base. And it's not. So possibly something wrong with T2, but we continue. So I just have to remind myself where everything is. So I'm on R6 at the minute. That should be R7. It's got nothing in it at all. Top of R7. Top of R8. Interesting. I think we might have a broken trace here. So I'm going to do some investigating and come back. Right, I was just measuring the wrong legs, that was all. So up here, emitter is 5.6 and base is 4.9. That's roughly half a volt higher. So T2 should be on. So one way we can check that. Turn off. Give them that. See it? I did just a crocodile lead there. Well, turn back off. Did you see the pulse? I've got the logic probe tied up to the top of R6, which is on the other side of T2. See it, do it again. Something's blinking, you miss it. Give it time. Maybe try to turn it on too fast. Capacitor's maybe still discharging. There's possibly something wrong with D1 that's not blocking it. Let's see. Just a couple of the light again. Oh. We did see it pulse briefly. It's very tricky to get on that. We'll have to give it time. You can't turn them on and off rapidly. As it says, it defeats it. So we'll have to give it time. Bear with me. Hold that just so you can see that probe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just hold it there. Dead there. Dead there. Right. Hold on a minute, gents. There. Did you see it? Thank you very much, Claire. I had to get Claire to help me there. You need about 18 pairs of hands to do these videos sometimes, but did you see it? Yeah. Pulse coming into the top of R6. Because there's some exposed traces here, sometimes you use crocodile clips. Don't know if I held up the probe there. Sometimes when you use crocodile clips, you're hitting other traces that you shouldn't. But did you... We have a pulse at the top of R6, which is after T2, so the reset pulse is getting through T2. It's not getting to T4 because the board doesn't reset. So where does that leave us? Well, I'm going to say that T3's bust, because I measured it off camera, I checked it off camera, and the pulse is getting through T2, but nothing's coming from T3. And T2 ties directly to T3. If T2 is passing voltage, T3 will turn on. But we're getting no reset pulse. So I don't have a BC238 handy. I do have, I've got one. I have a 2N3904. So I need to check what way around I have to mount it on the board. It's still basically, it's still collector, base and emitter. The base is still the middle pin, but it's where the collector and emitter are the counts. So I need to know what way around to put it on the board, but I'll work that out. I'll try it, and we'll see if we're reset pulse comes back. So there's a bit of a telltale sign there. The collector of T3 is just stuck low all the time. So that's definitely a red flag. So, progress. Change this T3 here for a 2N3904. You have to put it in backwards because the pin is run around. Now I've got the pulse here, and I've got the pulse at the blocking diode at D2. But I don't have any pulse getting to here, so I think there's a broken trace under there. Or perhaps that T4's bust as well. But so that'll be my next protocol. We'll take this T4 out and we'll see how we look. So, hard to see. You hear that? That's the base of T4. It's wiggling. Trace was broken between the base of D4 and blocking diode D2. So I've rejoined them. I'd recommend, I'll probably maybe put a stronger wire link under there, but it was a little fixed wire, and I've rejoined it to the base of D2. Let's see what happens. There's something else that's happening because we're drawing more power. Oh, would you look at that? We have ignition. Data line for the alpha display. Let's connect up the alpha and see what we're actually doing. I think we're resetting now. Right, alpha's in. Bang. She lurks. She's going to spit out error 201, 202 and 203 and 204 and all that jazz. But she's alive. I haven't got any of my wire links in, so the deals aren't going to do is short all. You see the other board there, I've got the wire links in. So it was T3, T4 and a couple of wire links. But is she up and running? It's not going to go into attract. The pub version won't go into attract with the reels missing. That one will if I trick it. This one doesn't. But she's working. Everything's up and running. So, I'll go away and I'll test a couple of things. I might add you a little reset switch under there, but I don't want to mess with those traces too much. You had the alpha display and you're drawing another 200 milliamps. But, yeah. It all is good. Turn it off. Wait the 30 seconds. If I try and turn it straight on back away, it won't start. Turn it back on. Boom. There we go. Oh, and there was a trace missing between processor and CTC as well. It was there, but it was resistive, so that might explain why sometimes the board reset and sometimes not. Now she's on. So that'll be it for this video, part 1.5. I need to do the reset circuit in that one now. Just quick note, when you get that board back, the transistor, yes, is in backwards, but it's not the right type. Get yourself a BC238 and turn it around. And fit it in correctly. Just match it to your other boards. 2N3904 will work, but it's not the right one. It will work long term. This is purely just to demonstrate how to fix the reset. So that's that. Probably will be retiring my everything power supply now, because this will be the new everything power supply. I'll make a distribution box or something to sit here so I can plug looms into it. And then I'll just have this set to parallel mode, and this will be able to kick out 4 amps. So, yeah. Bye-bye for now.